good evening or good whatever part of the day if you watch it later. My name is Vít Janeček, and I would like to welcome here the honored guest, Daniel Kötter, the author of the film you watched. And we will have a debate, maybe going from a little bit larger scales and rooted in other activities of Daniel, and then getting closer to the film. If we have direct viewers, you are welcome to write questions through chat, Q&A, or you can raise your virtual hand and show that you want to ask, and I can call you later to ask your questions directly. Zuzu, já potřebuji ticho. I'm sorry, I'm also in the flat. Real life is around us.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I would ask first the question. The film from Africa we have seen is a wider part of or part of the project which is wider. It is intended trilogy, and you know that it is trilogy, or it will maybe follow with other places. Mm-hmm. And can you maybe say if the idea of trilogy was first, or if there was a kind of if you have revealed something during the previous film, and then you came to the idea that number 3 is important for the concept to show something from different angles.
I mean, in general, I like to work in series or in a ongoing. I mean, if I'm interested in a certain topic, I like to deal with the same topic in different places, and then develop sort of a series of work on that. So I'm not hopping every year into completely different interests, but it's ongoing. In that case of this trilogy about the peripheries of urban spaces, it was not clearly planned as a trilogy. It just turned out to be one, because the number 3 is just, for many reasons, an obvious number for like building up things and ideas to a certain extent. So with Finfinnee, which deals with the urban periphery of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, is the 3rd part of the trilogy. That started with a film on the peripheries of Tehran in Iran called Hashti Tehran, and also dealt with the 2nd part dealt with Cairo and the desert cities around Cairo. And I mean, the whole idea to this series actually grew out of another series of 6 films, so a double trilogy if you want, that was mainly dealing with city centers. It's a series I did together with my colleague Constanze Fischbeck, with who I also did the Cairo film. And we were looking at symbolically charged places, urban places, theater architecture in city centers. And the last film we did in that series, which was shot in Beirut, ends with this question: why are we actually looking always in this overly claimed charged, symbolically charged spaces in the city center? Why don't we go to the periphery, where the city and the growth of the city, the processes, the transformations are at stake, where we can see what the city wants to expel from its inner core, and on the other hand, how this kind of spaces that represent also the desires of the urban people in terms of like less density, less pollution, and so on. So that was the start of, for me, thinking on that topic in general. Since I'm also very much interested in landscape and architecture, it was sort of a natural topic. And at the same time, I was also working in different cities in the Middle East. So in the beginning, I thought it would be maybe 3 films on on cities in the Middle East, and I mean, Tehran and Cairo was the start. But then I did research for another completely different project in Addis Ababa, and I saw the dimension and also the the exemplarity or of that situation there for the entire African continent, which is another area where I did a couple of works before. So then I chose that Addis Ababa would be a very interesting third part after Tehran and Cairo. So I started working on Rift Finfinnee.
Once you are choosing a particular place, here it is very interesting valley, which has also geological history, which is reflected in the film, and you are trying to place really very different layers of exposing the place. And we see that there is a kind of also expose the conflict of two tribes, which is probably something which you mean that is very typical for Africa, that this kind of tribal existence of people and communities which we may perceive from outside as a kind of one nation or one community, but there are clear, invisible lines where people know who is where on which side. Can you say a little bit more about finding this particular place, and was your choice just given by fascination by these layers concentrated in one place?
Yeah, actually the whole trilogy starts from a geographic or a geological even research or an idea that the way we live together, or social and political relations, are already inscribed in a geographic situation that then in the course of years and the development of the spaces become a socio or even psycho geography. And in the case of Tehran, it was very important, the relation between North Tehran in the mountains and South Tehran in the desert, which really creates this city, and you can show the different layers. And in the case of Addis Ababa, I did research in all parts of the periphery of the city, but I got really fascinated in this by this eastern periphery exactly for that reason, because the eastern periphery of the city, this rift, this valley that the film starts also with, cuts off Addis Ababa like abruptly. And it's part of the Great African Rift Valley that will, in a geologic future, separate the continent in two parts. So I'm interested in how over like even centuries or cultural development, social development, political development already starts with this geography. And on the so that there is a division that then is continuing and re-inscribed into social behaviors. And the other aspect there is that you can, in a very small dimension, you can see all these different living situation, housing situations. So all of the places that you see in the actually four different parts of the film, from very rural and very poor to the high class, upper class, gated community, they're all in walking distance from each other, and they are along, if you walk from south to north along this this valley. And so the geography not only sort of brings about the social tension and the political tension in that area, but also gave already sort of the structure for the film, that the camera would sort of travel from south to north along the eastern periphery, along that valley. Maybe just one comment, because just to make clear, I know you didn't mean it like this, but the question of the two different tribes is actually a very, very delicate one in that case. And because if we say we start with like geographic situations that create divisions, and then we go on to social and political situations that create divisions, the ethnic situation or the tribal situation, we always need to be very aware, and especially in that Ethiopian case at the moment, they're always constructed, and they're always highlighted by people who have very clear political interest. They're instrumentalized actually, and that's exactly what's happening. in that spaces that you see in the film, even after I finished the film, when the situation was a bit less tense, since the last months, it got much worse again, with a lot of people being arrested, being in prison, with a lot of bloody protests again. So that's why I'm saying we really have to, even when we talk about, as Westerners, talk about the African continent, that on one hand, it's a really tense and dangerous situation, and we need to be really careful how we talk about it, because these dividing lines, ethnic dividing lines, they don't exist biologically or naturally. They're always constructed by people who want to have political interests, and they are most of the time violent.
It's interesting that you are basically exposing the conflicts, but you don't go into analysis of it. So
Yes.
we can guess if it's a struggle of tribal groups, or if it's a struggle of maybe some developing or let's say financial groups. We don't know if it's if there is some, for example, international involvement, if it's if it has some geopolitical dimension, etc. Do you have some comments for this? How the reality is, and when you say it's being constructed, it means it's being constructed from the side of government, or it's being constructed more locally? Because I mean, these conflicting ideas.
I mean, the construction of ethnicity is a long topic, of course. I mean, in the whole, we know that the whole genocide in Rwanda was only possible because even in colonial times, the Belgians made that division in the passports between Hutu and Tutsi. And so you have to also look into the deep roots of this kind of conflicts and the very everyday life, contemporary reasons for this. And there is not the good side or the bad side. I mean, both sides, or all sides in the case of Ethiopia, have a history with that. That starts, as I say, in geography even. But at the moment, on all sides, there are players who want to increase their political influence. So also that is one of the reasons why the film, on one hand, does not take a clear side, because who am I to make my own judgment on that situation? That is very, very complex. I mean, I did research a lot on locations and on the case, but I'm not the person to judge that local situation. I am a filmmaker from abroad who has his own view. In the first place, a visual and a sonic idea about what he wants to do. And as much as it's important for me to be informed about the topic that I'm working on, I mean, I don't want to replace Wikipedia, right, to a certain extent, because I'm trying to give the viewer an experience in the first place, to transport, to make the viewer travel to that place, and to raise maybe questions about, like, why is it like this? Not instead of giving the answer, because I don't feel myself being in the position to give the answer. So that also explains a little bit the form, the dramaturgic form of the film, but also the relation between sound and image, which is worked on and recorded separately. I don't know if you want me to go on that.
No.
Question,
but yeah, it's. I mean, it's clear. Maybe let's go to the dramaturgy, which you mentioned. The film has very strong audio design. I would say it's one layer are sounds which are definitely like made as a sound design. It's probably not only, let's say, one or stereo microphone grasping one location. It's more like a montage of sounds from the place. And then there are mostly dialogues by locals in local languages, strictly in local languages, which probably also kind of shows kind of your awareness about this long debate starting in 50s with Jean Rouge and different accusations how to avoid, let's say, colonial approach to different reality, because if we, which is in mainstream, you have quite obvious that filmmakers come to the place and then they add a commentary which explains in our words, our terms, let's say the experience. You are completely, we have completely different approach, but still it would be interesting to see how, what is primary. Is the primary sound that you talk to many people and then you kind of associate these dialogues with maybe some people in the landscape, or are these association even more direct, that it might happen that people which we see in the picture are also the people we can hear, because it's never clear. Yeah, maybe most strongest association is with this taxi driver, where we can, you are very close and we can think it's maybe him, maybe it's not him. And I think this ambiguity doesn't, it's not harming anything, it's creating a tension. But still, it would be interesting to see that if sounds come first and then basically you are kind of finding images to accompany it, or if it's processed in the editing room, how do you work?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that sound comes first in temporally, but it was a clear decision from the very beginning to have a sound and image recording separately. This has, one of the reasons is that it changes the working method. It gives me a freedom to move around with the camera and stay distant, so to don't really get close to people, because that is my position as a foreign filmmaker working in Ethiopia, that I cannot pretend to be really close. Although I was very closely for weeks and weeks working with people on an everyday basis, much more close than the film would suggest. But on a more conceptual level, it is not my position. So I should stay the distant person that travels, or the camera that travels through those spaces. And at the same time, exactly, I wanted to avoid any voiceover that pretends to know more. So it was clear that I wanted to have Ethiopians talking with Ethiopians. And I had a collaboration with the EIABC, it's the architecture school of the University of Addis Ababa, with who I went on several excursions and working with students as well. And so I prepared them to go on location and do this kind of more everyday life conversations with people they would randomly encounter. And this was recorded. And out of this, I created the soundscapes also. I mean, of course, we also separately recorded ambiences, but these conversations took place in exactly the same places that I would go on another day to film also. And that allowed me to associate image and sound in a way, sort of suggesting that there could be a possible relation, exactly the way you describe it. And that's done on purpose, in the sense also, I mean, people do ask me, why don't you introduce your protagonist and stuff? The idea behind this is a little bit that I think I'm very much interested in spatial politics and the relation between space and people, and how people can change space in a social and political setup, or are being changed or being put into their social place. And then it's no longer about an individual biography, but a farmer in the east of Addis Ababa represents the farmers, the Oromo farmers in the east of Addis Ababa. So it's more like, on one hand, very concrete everyday life conversations, but they stand for situations of a lot of people. So it's not this specific night guards that this film is about, but the night guards in more general. So he stands for them. So the film, I guess, and I hope, suggests, I mean, given all these rifts that the film is talking about, the social, political, and geographic rifts, the film suggests also, on a level in the relation between sound and image, some transitions, like the allegoric bridge that is the opening shot of the film. So there are some tiny and vulnerable connections where you could establish links within society. I don't want to go too far because, of course, it's just also a method and a technical way of working and generating your material. But these were some thoughts that were in my head when working.
I think it's quite important also for once I see it, it's quite interesting to know this dimension, how much is the connection. So maybe also for the viewers, I would maybe remind the viewers, if you are watching the show, the debate with Daniel Kötter, the author of the film Rift Finfinnee, which you have seen, you can ask questions. If you came later, you can ask questions through Q&A, or you can directly raise your virtual hand and I will bring you in and you can ask question directly. So this option still exists. And unless it happens, we continue in a debate together. Based on credits, it's clear that you work quite independently, basically in one person, as I understand, which gives you probably a lot of freedom to really sneak in wherever you want, much better than with the crew. Maybe because around Jihlava film festivals there are also filmmakers associated. It would be interesting to see also technical side of your work. Which equipment are you using? Are you using DSLR, like a small camera, in such situation to be invisible, or can you reflect a little bit on that?
Yes, it's. I mean, on one hand, yes, I'm working a lot on my own, so to say, but on the other hand, it's very important to collaborate. So I already mentioned the EIABC that has this research program also together with the German university, the Bauhaus University in Weimar. So in the preparation over 1.5 years, I was exchanging a lot with a lot of Ethiopians, but also urbanists from Weimar that would study and research in Ethiopia. And then also, of course, as I said, while recording, a lot of other people were involved. But when it comes to camera, yes, true. I try to be as humble and just integrate myself as much as you can do that as a white person and as a obvious foreigner with a camera in this kind of situations. Yes, I do work with DSLR camera and a simple tripod in that regard. And I try as I said, also as part of this method, I try to avoid sound crew around me. Most of the conversations were recorded just with very small light audio equipment, where the sound recordist, and he was a bit frustrated about that, was not even present. Like I wasn't present on the sound recordings because our presence would have changed the conversations completely. The conversations would take place, they would be informed that it's recorded and that it's collaboration between the university and the film project, but still we wouldn't be there. So the situation of the conversations would evolve naturally. So yeah, that's basically the way I try to work when I work in this kind of context, where your position as a white foreigner is very clearly marked on the African continent, of course.
Yeah, because it's in terms of situations which are present in the sound, there are really very diverse kind of contexts being reflected. I have mentioned already this geological context, where suddenly there is a little lecture on geology nearly in European style, but in a local language. It means it's probably some local expert who knows this kind of layer, very unusual probably for many locals. And then there are many just everyday situations, either reflecting on political situation, or we are in this neighborhood where the women are discussing about, I don't know, hiring the rents, and we see that there are these kind of, let's say, housing problems, as we maybe know even from Europe or from wherever in the place, and it's all integrated into one image. It's also interesting, all these images of mining. It's a lot of mining there. Is it? It's probably most metaphorical thing, because we see that Africa is a source of these mineral resources for the rest of the world in many ways. Did you when you were moving around, were you confronted also with some kind of efforts to stop you or to question what are you doing? Were you crossing some interests which might be kind of cautious, what's happening, etc.?
Yes, I mean, we did, because that area is a area full of tension, and I think the film was only possible because we were filming in the time between Abiy Ahmed, the minister president, the first Oromo born Mr. President, who also got the Nobel Peace Prize, as you might know. So it felt a little less tense during the time when we were working there. So probably now, in these months, right now, we could not do the same film there and go there. The interesting thing is that, yes, for example, since you mentioned mining, close to this quarry, at the beginning, quite after like 15 minutes into the film, we did have some major problems. Actually, we were attacked, but not because we are white and we are filmmakers, but because of a very stupid misunderstanding that turned into a very violent situation. Because, and later on in the film, you have a similar situation in the conversations, where the people mistook the tripod and the camera as a measuring tool. So they were really afraid, and they're really afraid to their bones, that they would lose even more land, because most of the farmers, they really feel fooled. They worked their entire lives on the land, and then they had to give it away for almost no compensation. So that's where the protest sparked in general, also the bloody protest. And that was apparent when they thought that we would be measuring their land, which can only mean for them that we will come to even more expand the city on their land. And so it easily got violent, but I mean, luckily nothing really serious happened. But it made us also feel the tension in a time where the tension was less. So as I said, it would probably not be possible to film in that area right now. And as much, I did show the film to some students already in Ethiopia, and I have the plans, of course, to bring it back and have the film discussed in Ethiopia itself. But at the moment, actually yesterday at the work premiere, I did talk with some people from the crew, Ethiopians also, and they said, for now, it's probably not possible to show. We have to wait a little bit.
It's when Jean Rouch was making his films in Africa or in the different, mainly he was focusing on Africa. You were shooting also in other cultures. It's as we see from this distance of 50, 60 years, maybe nearly all his key collaborators became filmmakers, getting this inspiration. Do you see something of this side on your journey through, not only maybe through the whole trilogy, that your activity brought some inspiration to, because you were working also with students, however it were students probably of urban planning or different kind of things. Can you see this kind of transfer of inspiration on the other hand?
You should ask the students, I guess, not me. I mean, of course, I always hope that whatever encounter, not me necessarily being a teacher or someone who inspires other people, I don't see myself in that position. But I think that is with all the questions that you can have of a Western privileged filmmaker going to these places, doing a film funded by European funds, most probably, that is a situation of prolonged and extended coloniality. There is no doubt about it. So I mean, there's a lot of good reasons to also stop doing this, you know. But I do have this interest of the encounter. I do have the interest of the travel. And I do still think that an outer perspective, like also an African perspective, making films in Europe, for example, would be highly interesting and would make us as Europeans learn a lot about our continent, which is very necessary, I think, to have that outer perspective. I mean, I know what I can say is that when I showed the film to the students in Addis, that they were actually impressed because as urbanists, they have a very different method, and they would maybe not, I don't know, achieve, but they would have different kind of conversations there. And this kind of conversations that I was able to get, or not I, but that happened there because of I sent them to have that conversations, are quite different. And so they learned, because also my material is much bigger and I shared it partly with them. So they could learn about the situation of a day laborer, of a farmer there in a different way compared to when they go with their academic interests there. So in that sense, I hope that I can change the perspective of some Ethiopians, but apparently, obviously, I'm very much depending on me having to change my perspective in Ethiopia due to the collaboration that I did there. And that's also hopefully what some audience in the West or in Europe that watch the film and experience the film, that they would have a different impression of Addis Ababa.
For sure. I will again address our potential audience. If someone who is watching wants to ask the question, you can write to Q&A in written form, or you can raise your electronic hand and you can enter the debate, which we are continuing with Daniel Kötter, the director of the film Rift Finfinnee. You were mentioning before we started that you are just now in the middle of your rehearsing or even in the middle of performance, which also, as I read, you are always focusing for this kind of bringing different cultures together, and maybe even actors, non-actors, these kind of things. Can you? It's also quite interesting because I think in Europe, when people are dealing with theater, they are mostly associated with fiction film, more like switching between fiction and theater, kind of classically staged or in more classical form. Can you reflect on this, your background, and if you see also some connections with the film which people can imagine?
Yes, actually my background, I have a master, I hold a master in musicology, so there is even yet another aspect of that background which might lead to some particular interest in the sound also for the film. But I think my interest in theater, why I do it since by now 20 years, is quite specific. I'm not so much interested in the as if or telling stories or actors and stuff, but for me the theater is an interesting space where you can experience space, different from in the cinema. It's very clear frontal situation, while in the cinema itself, so in the theater itself, for the audience, it's a different kind of space experience. And that's what I'm interested in. It's a space and time machine. Like a good film ideally is also a space and time machine. And that's, I think, the link a little bit, although I am in general also trying to include documentary techniques in general, but also film techniques into the performances that I do. And right here now, it's a piece that I did last year. We're just setting up for a guest performance here in Dresden. It's a series on mining, so it's interesting you mentioned mining. I wasn't actually aware that there is this link between Rift Finfinnee, that's also, that mining plays a role in Rift Finfinnee, the fundamental transformation of landscape. So yes, that's apparently something that I'm interested in, because mining and extractivism has temporal and spatial dimensions that are beyond us because they're so vast. But on the other hand, it also considers each and every body, each and every person and individual. And this is a similar situation why I got fascinated in Rift Finfinnee, by this geographic situation, the transformation of landscape. That's why in the film also this process from the landscape that is grabbed by the machines and then grinded and made into the stones that then will be assembled into the geometric housing blocks, that this is a reoccurring topic within the film. So I think it's this interest in a spatial and temporal experience that links also my work in the theater to my interest in filmmaking. So the film Rift Finfinnee itself, it doesn't work with theatrical techniques at all, but the link between the two practices that I'm doing is this interest, the experience of time and space.
Yeah, still in terms of dramaturgy, of course, we are in the situation where always some elements we have seen in some films or novels or like compositions before. The way how you work with this association of these voices and images, it resembled me in some moments, for example, to Margaret Dira, where she was also very much separated these like spatial dimensions, however, making it connected in a way, or probably also is there some reference for you important, like, I don't know, films by Chantal Akerman, where she was working totally different, of course, with their films from the East, but also from, let's say, third world countries or countries beyond the Iron Curtain, bringing just images, not working with sound, with completely different dramaturgy. But do you have some favorite reference or inspiration for you in cinema? It's maybe stupid question, but
no, it's not a stupid question. I mean, there's many I could now name. It's the question how much it is name dropping. Of course, De l'Est by Chantal Akerman was really, if I had to name 10 films that changed my life, probably that film would be one of them. But I mean, in terms of how I first maybe separate and then associate sound and image, probably more like structuralist experimental filmmaking from the USA was important. Ernie Gare, Michael Snow, and this kind of people. And I tried to do some of that kind of stuff before I moved more into documentary film. I mean, a film that everyone should watch is Harvest 3000 Years from Haile Gerima, which is, for me, one of the best films from an African filmmaker I have seen. I'm not an expert on African films, and African people will maybe now hate me for saying that, but it's really and it is a film that deals a lot with how you relate a certain camera technique and landscape. And of course, like this beginning shots with people walking in landscape, they got inspired by that really amazing film. But that's a masterpiece, and Rift Finfinnee is just trying something out. So that's why I always feel a bit bad to mention this great films and references. But yes, I mean, it's just for people who don't know the film and watch this conversation, it's just the advice to go and watch that film. Because also you learn a lot about Ethiopia as well.
And I'm still calling for the viewers that you can ask your questions by writing to Q&A or raise your electronic hand. We are coming to finale. As I was told, it should be around 40 minutes or something like this. But still, when you said you like to work in a series, and now your trilogy has been finished, do you have some new series of connected with one topicality which you want to explore?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm working on this series of performances right now that deal with mining, and the very substantial part of this series is 360-degree films. So each case study, and it will be 4 case studies in all, on mining in West Papua in Indonesia, and East Germany and West Germany, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and maybe then a 5th part in Estonia, I don't know yet. Depending on funding. So these is ongoing, and I was in September now in DRC in Congo, filming 360-degree films, which is quite new for me. I started doing that like 1.5 to 2 years ago, and I find it interesting, especially for this kind of non-frontal experience of the viewer, but also of the camera person. That allows a very different approach, especially to places far away. I mean, also for viewers from the West in relation to the global South. I do think that there's a lot of potential in 360-degree viewing of situations, because it reverses the power of the gaze a little bit, at least, or it smoothens it. So yeah, this will keep me busy next year for sure. And I mean, yes, of course, there's ideas in my head to also make a like more conventional film that could be screened in the cinema on that topic. I was very much fascinated by the situation, the research situation in Papua when I worked there last year, and I have very interesting collaborators, because that would be another idea to move more, when I go to this kind of places, move more into real collaborations, in the sense that also basic artistic decisions would be delegated to close collaborators. So, but this is all up in the air, and depending on funding, and in this Corona situation, who knows what will be next year. So I don't know.
Especially for these kinds of projects, which are really depending on traveling.
Exactly.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Is there something which we didn't go through, questions, and maybe you were thinking to share with the audience?
I don't know. The audience should tell. No, I think we touched on most important things and aspects around that film. Some people asked me about the music, which I was very hesitant to use, because I am very critical about use of music. But yeah, I mean, I use it for structural reasons, to mark sort of this kind of like the core points and the dramaturgy of the film. And it's deliberately chosen Ethiopian tune that is in the rhythm of 3, which is more like a circular rhythm than the rhythm of 4. So it also sort of represents this kind of ongoing walking through the East. But apart from that, I think we talked a lot.
Okay, so I would thank you for sharing the ideas with us and with the future viewers of this chat. And I wish you good luck in your work now, and hopefully next time better in cinema than in some online versions.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
It was nice to meet you. Goodbye.
Same here.
Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.